Hello and welcome to The History Hour with me, Max Pearson, the past brought to life by those who were there. This week it's Black History Month in America, and we've got a selection of first-hand memories of African-American history, how the Black Panthers challenged stereotypes with community work in the 1960s.
The FBI, under its leader at that time, J. Edgar Hoover, hated the Black Panther Party and its programs.
The astonishing Henrietta Lacks, whose cells, harvested from her dying body in the 1950s, continue to make medical history.
From my research, I found out that they selling her cells all over the world, and I just wanted to find out who is making money off my mother's cell.
And cultural history with the late, great Mary Wilson.
It was this huge exchange of music at that time. The borders were opening up. 64 definitely was a year when music began to sort of dictate even more than politics.
That's after we get a bulletin of the latest world news.
Hello, I'm Debbie Russ with the BBC News. Emergency medical workers in Myanmar say at least 2 people have been killed and several others injured at a protest in the city of Mandalay against this month's coup. Simon Ponsford has more details.
Witnesses said police used live ammunition as they tried to disperse the crowd in Mandalay, Myanmar's second city. They'd been clashing with shipyard workers who were on strike. It's an escalation in the military's response to the daily demonstrations across Myanmar. They began when the Burmese army seized power on the 1st of February and detained the elected leader Aung San Suu Kyi. There were also large rallies on Saturday in Yangon, where people mourned the death of a young woman shot in the head last week as police dispersed a crowd in the capital Naypyidaw. She's become the symbol of resistance to the coup.
A court in Russia has upheld a decision to jail the opposition activist Alexei Navalny for 2.5 years in a prison camp. The judge shortened his term by 6 weeks because of time already spent under house arrest. From Moscow, here's Sarah Rainsford.
From a glass cage in court, Alexei Navalny made a passionate final appeal against the prison sentence. He insisted he hadn't violated the terms of his probation, but had been recovering abroad after a poisoning with nerve agents. Addressing the nation as much as the judge, he vowed that the future Russia wouldn't only be free, wealthy and have independent courts, but be happy. Shrugging off widespread international condemnation of Navalny's treatment, President Putin's spokesman hinted again today at the Kremlin's claim that he is an agent and tool of the West.
The head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, is travelling to Iran today as efforts continue to try to revive the Iran nuclear deal. Rafael Grossi's visit comes 2 days before Iran says it will stop IAEA visits to its nuclear facilities unless the US lifts its sanctions. A woman has been found shot dead at a camp for displaced people in northern Syria that is notorious for holding a large number of families of Islamic State fighters. Sebastian Usher reports.
The Syrian woman in her 20s was found in her tent after she'd been shot in the head and the neck. No one reported hearing gunshots, so Kurdish officials who run Al-Hul camp believe it's likely a silencer was used. That fits a pattern of killings that has terrorized the camp this year. Officials blame IS. The camp holds more than 60,000 people, 80% of them women and children. Most are Syrian and Iraqi, but some 10,000 are from elsewhere. The question of their repatriation has long been an issue, with most countries only reluctantly taking back their nationals. The latest wave of killings has refocused attention on their situation.
Sebastian Usher reporting. You're listening to the World News from the BBC. Russia has announced that it has registered its third vaccine against the coronavirus. The Prime Minister, Mikhail Mishustin, said the new vaccine, called Covivac, has been produced by the state-run Chumakov Center in Moscow. He said it will be introduced in Russia by March, though large-scale clinical trials are not yet underway. Indonesia's capital, Jakarta, has been hit by severe flooding, leaving whole neighbourhoods submerged in water some 2 metres high. More than 1,000 people have been forced to flee. Cars on several roads were left underwater. Some children used their streets as a swimming pool. More heavy rain is forecast. Arturo Di Modica, the creator of Wall Street's Charging Bull statue, has died in his native Sicily. He was 80 and had been fighting cancer. The larger-than-life-size bronze statue was intended to symbolise the fighting spirit of New York. Demodica originally deposited it without permission in 1989 outside the New York Stock Exchange after the financial crash, only for it to be promptly removed by police. But a public outcry led to its official restoration nearby a few days later. In tennis, Naomi Osaka of Japan has won the women's final at the Australian Open in Melbourne, securing her fourth Grand Slam title. She defeated the American Jennifer Brady in straight sets, 6-4, 6-3. The BBC's David Law said Osaka won the title in style.
She is some player and some champion. This is the fourth Grand Slam final of Naomi Osaka's pretty young career still, and she's won a lot. And she closes out matches like nobody else in the world today. And she came out, it was a bit tense, it was tight against Jennifer Brady, who's a very, very good player, who's improved enormously. But she just gets better in the most important moments, i.e. serving for a title, which she served out to love today. She doesn't buckle, and she just made it look quite easy in the end.
BBC News.
Hello, this is the History Hour with Max Pearson, where this week we're marking what is, in America, Black History Month. Since 1926, February in the US has been characterised by continued reflection on the African-American experience, an experience rooted in slavery and the persistent racist policies of segregation in the South. America may have had its first black president in Barack Obama, but still today protests over the plight of African-Americans continue. Black Lives Matter. Bringing their first-hand experience to the World Service this week have been several figures from that history. But on the programme, we're also going to hear how the story of slavery in the Americas has shaped events and personal histories in Britain too. But we're going to begin in the late 1960s, when the apparent legal successes of the civil rights movement were, for many, failing to deliver the promised benefits. So a more radical approach took hold. The Black Panther Party endorsed a more robust resistance to oppression, while at the same time engaging in community activity, including, as Lucy Burns reports, a 1969 programme to provide free breakfasts for school children in California.
Eggs, toast, bacon, milk, oranges, apples, those little individual boxes of cornflakes. Once a week we'd have pancakes.
This is the Reverend Earl Neal. He's an Episcopal priest. In 1969, he was leading St. Augustine's Church in a deprived area of Oakland, California, and he helped set up their program, providing free breakfast for local children.
The need that was obvious was that there were children who did not have breakfast. They had hunger pangs, poor performance in schools. A lot of them would just buy candy at school and at stores. And we began with 11 youngsters on the first day, which was a Monday. And by Friday, we were serving about 135 students.
But it wasn't just about toast and pancakes, because the free breakfast were one of the flagship programs of the Black Panther Party, which the then head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, said represented without question the greatest threat to internal security in America.
The whole black nation has to be put together as a black army. And we're going to walk on this nation. We're going to walk on this racist power structure.
I became involved with them through one of our parishioners, Mrs. Ruth Beckford Smith, who taught Afro-Haitian dance in Oakland. And Huey Newton, who was one of the founders of the Black Panther Party, his girlfriend was one of her students. And Huey, in October '67, had been arrested for allegedly shooting a police officer. There was an altercation that went down in West Oakland. And I asked Laverne if she thought that Huey would mind if I visited him in his jail cell, and she said no, he wouldn't. And that's how I became involved with the party.
Reverend Earl Neal was already an experienced campaigner for black civil rights. He'd helped organise the historic marches from Selma to Montgomery in Alabama in 1965 and helped black people register to vote in Mississippi. But the civil rights movement was facing strong resistance. Peaceful protesters had been attacked by white vigilantes and beaten and tear-gassed by the police, and the change they were demanding was slow to arrive.
The whole mood around black people in the U.S. was changing from just nonviolence to one of self-defense, and that believed that people had the right to defend themselves. Even Dr. King began to move to that position.
Revolution has come. Time to pick up the gun.
The Black Panther Party, originally the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense, was part of this new wave of activism. They were calling for a revolution in America, including armed conflict. They'd hold military-style drills, marching with guns in their uniforms of leather jackets and black berets. But they also wanted systemic social change to address the poverty and deprivation endemic in many black areas, like Earl Neal's community in Oakland.
There was a feeling of hopelessness, and especially among the young people. And instead of them being out gangbanging and what have you, many of them joined the party and saw that as a very positive part of their life. They could redirect their energies.
The Black Panther Party set up a number of social programs. They called them survival programs. Health centres, prison visit services, community classes and economics and first aid. Earl Neal invited the party to start holding meetings in the basement of his church.
It was my belief, of course, and still is, that the church is there not only for the benefit of people's souls, but also to deal with community issues and community problems. In Luke chapter 4, starting with verse 11, I don't mean to quote too much scripture on you, Jesus defined his own ministry as dealing with the human condition, that he'd come to bring relief to the captive, recovery of sight to the blind, and to heal those who are oppressed.
And the way Earl Neal and his parishioner Ruth Beckford Smith decided to start fighting that oppression was with the breakfasts. There was a lot of practical work to be done.
And this included consulting with nutritionists to determine what a healthy breakfast menu should include. My role was to meet with the local health board to certify that we met the necessary health and safety codes. We used our tax-exempt plastic knives, forks, and spoons.
They got donations from parishioners and local businesses, although not everyone was immediately keen, which meant the Black Panthers' activist tactics had to come into play.
But there was a Safeway store right across the street from us. When we first approached Safeway, they refused. But then the party threw a boycott to boycott milk products, especially because those were products that would spoil easiest. And then finally they did come around.
The free breakfast for children started in January with pupils from the local elementary school.
The program would start at 6:30 in the morning, when party members would set up everything and begin cooking. And then children would arrive at 7:30, be fed breakfast, and then dismissed by 8:30 so that they could be up to school at 8:45 when school opened. And Panther members also served as crossing guards for the children so that they could cross the street safely to school.
Being a crossing guard, or a lollipop lady as they're known in the UK, was a new departure for the famously tough Black Panthers.
The response from the community was very good, very positive. The principal told us that children were performing much better, much more alert in the classroom after they had had breakfast, and also changed the image that the party, that the press and media had created of them, of being a bunch of black young men with big naturals wearing black leather jackets. It was a very, very positive program, because who can argue with feeding hungry children?
Over the next couple of years, the free breakfast program spread to more than 45 Black Panther chapters across the country, feeding more than 20,000 school children. But not everyone was a fan.
The Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, under its leader at that time, J. Edgar Hoover, hated the Black Panther Party and its programs, and did everything that they, in their possible, to marshal local police forces to destroy and interrupt the functioning of the programs. They would invade the churches or the sites where the breakfast programs were being held, tell lies about the party, give out fake news, like they were teaching the children to be revolutionaries and to take up arms and to kill policemen. They were saying that the breakfast programs would spread disease and so forth.
Government bodies started to offer breakfast programmes too, maybe unwilling to be outdone by the Black Panthers. And the Black Panther Free Breakfast for Children project started to decline as the whole party began to struggle, with internal tensions adding to the external pressure from the authorities.
So a lot of people just got battle fatigue and just got tired, because it lasted from 1966 till around 72. And Huey and Bobby said, well, let's end this. We've made our point that the community can know that it has power within itself to effect change if we only come together and deal with the issues that confront us.
That's the Reverend Earl Neal speaking to Lucy Burns. So how significant was the impact of the Black Panther Party? And as it declined, did that signal the end of an organised advocacy of civil rights that endorsed a certain amount of use of violence? Well, joining me now is Professor Claiborne Carson of Stanford University in California, who's the director of the Martin Luther King Jr. Papers Project. First, what were the circumstances that gave rise to the emergence of the Black Panther Party?
I think it came out of the militancy of the 1960s, in the sense that there was always that demand for freedom now. You know, I remember going to the March on Washington, and that was the slogan. But what we were getting was freedom in little bits. And by the mid-1960s, I think the impatience had boiled over, particularly outside the South, because nothing much had changed in northern cities. You still had black ghettos in the north. You still had housing discrimination, employment discrimination. So I think that the Black Panther Party was a natural outgrowth of that.
And how far was it a violent movement? Because that's the way it was painted. The FBI said it was a threat to the very fabric of America.
I think they were more the victims of violence than, as you know, in the United States, anyone who watches the United States knows that the Second Amendment to the Constitution gives people the right to bear arms. And that's what they tried to exercise. But as you also know, if a black person walks down the street with a weapon, he's likely to be dead by the end of the street. So a right that's kind of has been reserved for white people. You know, I think when we compare, for example, the Black Panther Party, when they marched into this California state capitol with arms, they were prosecuted. The same thing happened in the state of Michigan in the United States with white racists walking into the Michigan Capitol, and nothing much happened to them. Not that I would put that at the top of the list of rights that black people should have, but it's interesting that in the United States, when we look at our Bill of Rights, that's second on the list.
Now, how much change did they manage to effect? How influential was the Black Panther movement in terms of the politics as it unfolded going into the 1970s?
A lot of their programs, their breakfast programs, their the Black Panther School here in Oakland and California, you know, a lot of those programs thrived during the 1970s and led to the foundation of independent black schools, led to some social problems, led to a very successful, although in the end defeated, race for the mayorship of Oakland. A lot of the Jesse Jackson campaigns of the 1970s and 80s came directly out of the work of the Black Panther Party, of organizing the black community in the North. Southern Christian Leadership Conference and King's Organization organized black people in the South. So I think it was part of that gradual movement of was often called the Civil Rights Movement. I think that's somewhat misnamed because it's usually seen as something that happened in the South. But in reality, it was a demand for basic rights by black people throughout the nation.
And can you explain more about how the Black Panther Party imploded, if you like? Because we've heard that there was infighting towards the end as it unraveled.
Sometimes the egos of people got in the way. There were ideological differences over how black people should organize.